Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're here because you've seen some of my more light-hearted or funnier videos, then this one is a bit more serious, but I hope you'll stick with it. Lately it seems like loads of people are being bold and outspoken about issues of gender and identity and forcing difficult but important conversations, calling people out on their overt or more often subtle and insidious transphobia. And you might think, who am I to speak about this? Well, luckily, I am from one of the least well-informed but most confident and outspoken groups there is. I'm a cishet man. Good for me. I can't claim to speak for trans people, but I do have privilege and more people listen when cishet people speak than when trans people do. Even though a lot of cishet people, especially the white ones, and the men, have a terrible record when it comes to minority issues and public pronouncements. And you might think, well, what has this guy ever done for trans people? So I'll give you an example. The other day I was having a conversation with my wife and we were talking about the famous Terf. No, not that one, the other one. She Who Must Not Be Named, the one who writes all the books about the wizard. That's the one. And we were talking about her concern over trans women being allowed into single-sex spaces like public toilets. And I said to my wife, why is it when we know that trans people just want to be allowed to use the toilet in peace, the famous Terf, and the other one, come to think about it, are obsessed with a tiny minority of hypothetical perverts who might use this as an excuse to sneak into public toilets and do something horrible to women, and so they think we should deny trans people their rights. But you never hear these same famous TERFs talking about how maybe cis-het men shouldn't be allowed to become company CEOs or film directors, or basically do any job that allows them to have some sort of power imbalance over women, even though there are loads of real-world examples we could point to prove how bad a track record cis-het men have of exploiting that power dynamic to abuse women.
And they don't need to sneak into a toilet to do it.
That's true, they don't need to sneak into a toilet to do it. And then I did what I usually do when I think I've made a good point about something, which is I feel very pleased with myself and wonder who I could share it with. Am I a good ally or what? But then I saw Abby Thorn of Philosophy Tube's brilliant coming out as trans video, as well as her shorter subsequent trans rights video. In it, she talks eloquently about how transgender people in the UK don't have equal rights. They are forced to go on waiting lists for surgery or hormones that cisgender people would be offered as a matter of course for hair loss or back pain. And sometimes they die still waiting for those hormones. She talked as well about how trans women, particularly trans women of colour, are disproportionately affected by unemployment, homelessness, domestic violence, sexual violence and police violence. And yet the discourse when we talk about trans rights in this country is almost always about wealthy cisgender women talking about toilets. So maybe it's time that we just stopped talking about the famous Terf for a bit. And I'm not saying we give her a free pass for her behaviour, I'm just saying let's not let her dominate the discourse. We need to all, as a society, dedicate more time and effort and focus on trans rights. Until they have equal rights, we can't let that drop. But if you only really have enough time and energy to dedicate to a small section of the discourse, then maybe don't make it the bit about the famous writer and the toilets again. And again, you might think it's not my place as a cisgender man to be making these points, but until trans people have equal rights, then we all need to be talking and listening and learning about these issues, and it shouldn't be on trans people to be constantly explaining and justifying themselves. Trans people shouldn't be responsible for smartening up cis people like us just so that they or we can feel more comfortable. If we can educate ourselves and do the reading, then that will free up trans people to go about the important business of living their own bloody lives. Also, maybe just stop asking people about their genitals or how they have sex. Who raised you? And doing the reading can sound like a slog, but it doesn't have to be. We are really lucky to live in a time where loads of really witty articulate, clever people have put a lot of thought into these subjects, and then they've expressed those thoughts in really accessible ways all over the internet. There are loads of videos, articles, films, even video games that deal with trans issues in ways that are engaging and articulate and engrossing, even fun and entertaining. And you might think, like I did for a long time, well, I'm supportive of trans people already. Like, I'm all for trans people, I'm not transphobic, why do I have to go and do a bunch of reading on the subject, you know? But the trouble is, at a time like this where trans people are fighting for their human rights, just being vaguely supportive isn't really good enough, and it's not going to help you if you end up in an argument with a Terf who's done a bunch of reading themselves and they have a load of bullshit points that they think backs up their argument, and you can't really marshal your defence because you haven't got any of the facts at your fingertips. So doing the reading can be really helpful in situations like that. And look, I don't want to sound like I'm being too preachy or telling other people what to do, because to be honest, this video is as much for me as anyone else. It's a sort of overly earnest attempt to make something and put it out in the world as a reminder to actually engage and do the things that I'm saying that we should all do, rather than just watch a YouTube video and nod along and move on to the next thing and forget about it. Do you see how quickly I made this video about trans rights all about me again? As a white, straight, cisgender male, I mean, that shit's just ingrained. You know, that's years of cultural training, but I'll try to do better. Plus, I'm a stand-up comedian, so I make some of my income from talking about myself, but I will try to do better, I promise. Alright, thanks for listening anyway, if you've made it this far, and I'll see you again. Thank you, bye. Hi, I'm sat here editing the video that you've just watched, and even just watching it back now, I'm already typically starting to slightly second guess myself and some of the things I said in the video. So I'm sure if you've made it this far, you're sort of generous, nice people who would give me the benefit of the doubt, but I just wanted to clarify a couple of points. First of all, there's a bit where I say that people listen to like cis people more than trans people, and I just wanted to clarify that is very sweeping. I obviously don't mean all people, I just mean, unfortunately, some people are more likely to listen to a cisgender voice kind of making these points than they are to listen to someone from the trans community, which I don't agree with, which is true. But also I do know that I have a very small platform. And many trans people have a much bigger platform and a much kind of wider audience, and are far more listened to than me, so I don't want to sound like I'm being deluded or self-aggrandizing or anything like that. And there are loads of brilliant trans voices out there. I just kind of feel like as cisgender people, we all need to be kind of doing our bit as well. And also there's a bit in the video where I sort of talk about transgender people shouldn't have to explain things to us, as if, you know, us is everyone watching this video and it's not for trans people. And I'd be very happy if trans people are watching this themselves, if they're getting anything out of it. I don't want to sound like it's us and them and it's just me wording things very badly. But if you disagree with anything that I've said and you think that I'm wrong about anything, then do feel free to let me know in the comments. I am open to correction and learning and all of those things, unless you actually are a bigot and a reactionary and a Terf or a transphobe, any of these things, in which case I don't think we're ever really gonna agree. Anyway, back to the credits.